Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more English story. I used to think success was a mountain, a steep, unyielding climb where the only way to reach the top was to crush every obstacle in my path. I'd heard the phrase crush your goals so many times it felt like a mantra, a battle cry. And for a long time, I believed it. I believed that if I just pushed harder, worked longer, and sacrificed more, I'd get there. I'd be there, wherever there was. But what I didn't realize was that the weight of crushing it can crush you, too. Let me take you back to where it all started. I was 23, fresh out of college, and armed with a degree I wasn't sure I even wanted. My parents were proud. My friends were envious. And I was terrified. Terrified of failing, of not living up to the expectations I'd set for myself. I'd always been the overachiever, the one who stayed up late to perfect a presentation or volunteered for extra projects just to prove I could handle it. But now, in the real world, the stakes felt higher. The mountain loomed larger. My first job was at a startup. It was the kind of place where hustle culture was glorified. The CEO would send emails at 2 a.m., and everyone would respond within minutes, as if sleeping was a sign of weakness. I threw myself into it, determined to prove I belonged. I worked 12-hour days, skipped meals, and canceled plans with friends. I told myself it was temporary, that once I made it, I could relax. But making it kept moving further away, like a mirage in the desert. At first, the adrenaline kept me going. I loved the praise I got for being the first one in the office and the last to leave. I loved the feeling of checking off tasks on my to-do list, each one a tiny victory. But slowly, the cracks started to show. I'd wake up exhausted, my body heavy with dread. My mind would race with thoughts of everything I hadn't accomplished yet. I started to resent my coworkers, convinced they were judging me for not doing enough. And then there were the migraines, sharp, blinding pains that would leave me curled up in the dark, unable to move. I told myself it was just part of the grind, that success required sacrifice. But deep down, I knew something was wrong. I just didn't know how to stop. The breaking point. It all came to a head one Tuesday morning. I'd been up all night finishing a presentation. Fueled by coffee and sheer willpower, I walked into the office, my hands shaking, and immediately felt the weight of everyone's eyes on me. My boss called me into a meeting, and as I sat there, trying to focus on what he was saying, my vision blurred, my chest tightened, and I couldn't breathe. I stumbled out of the room, gasping for air, and collapsed in the hallway. That was my first panic attack. I wish I could say that was the moment I realized I needed a change. But the truth is, I didn't. I blamed myself for being weak, for not being able to handle the pressure. I doubled down, working even harder to prove I wasn't a failure. But the panic attacks kept coming, each one worse than the last. My body was screaming at me to stop, but I didn't know how to listen. It wasn't until my best friend, Mia, sat me down and said, "You're killing yourself," that I finally started to see the truth. She didn't say it with pity or judgment, just raw, unfiltered honesty. And for the first time, I let myself really hear it. I was killing myself, slowly but surely, all in the name of crushing my goals. The turning point. I quit my job a week later. It wasn't a dramatic exit, no grand speech or burning bridges. I just knew I couldn't keep living like that. For the first time in years, I gave myself permission to rest. I slept. I ate real meals. I reconnected with friends I'd pushed away. And slowly, I started to feel like myself again. But the hardest part wasn't quitting my job. It was untangling the toxic mindset I'd built around success. I had to confront the belief that my worth was tied to my productivity, that I was only as valuable as my last achievement. I had to let go of the idea that success was a mountain I had to conquer alone. It wasn't easy. There were days when I felt like a failure, like I'd given up too soon. But over time, I started to see things differently. I realized that the mountain wasn't the problem, it was the way I was trying to climb it. I've been so focused on crushing my goals that I'd forgotten why I wanted to reach them in the first place. The power of genuine inspiration. The turning point came when I started volunteering at a community center. It was something I'd always wanted to do, but never had time for. At first, I felt out of place, like I didn't belong. But as I got to know the people there, kids who'd faced more challenges in their short lives than I could imagine, I started to see things in a new light. There was one boy, Miguel, who loved to draw. He'd spend hours sketching in his notebook. His face lit up with concentration. One day, I asked him what he wanted to be when he grew up. He looked at me like it was the most obvious thing in the world and said, "An artist. That's amazing." I said, "What's your plan?" He shrugged. "I don't know. I just want to keep drawing." His answer hit me like a lightning bolt. Here was this kid with every reason to give up, and he was doing what he loved simply because it made him happy. He wasn't worried about crushing his goals or proving himself to anyone. He was just inspired. That moment changed everything for me. I realized that inspiration wasn't something you could force or manufacture. It wasn't about pushing yourself to the brink or sacrificing your well being. It was about finding what lit you up inside and letting that guide you. A new path. I started to approach my own goals differently. Instead of focusing on the end result, I focused on the process. I asked myself why I wanted to achieve something, and if the answer didn't align with my values, I let it go. I learned to celebrate small wins, not just the big ones. And most importantly, I learned to ask for help. I went back to school, this time for something I was truly passionate about: psychology. I wanted to understand why we push ourselves to the brink, why we equate success with suffering. And I wanted to help others break free from the same toxic mindset I've been trapped in. It hasn't been easy. There are still days when I feel the pull of my old habits, when the voice in my head tells me I'm not doing enough. But now I know how to quiet that voice. I remind myself that success isn't a mountain to conquer, it's a journey to savor. And the only way to truly crush your goals is to do it with joy, with purpose, and with people who lift you up. The lesson: if there's one thing I've learned, it's this: toxic motivation will burn you out, but genuine inspiration will light you up. It's not about how hard you push or how much you sacrifice. It's about finding what makes you come alive and letting that guide you. So if you're out there, climbing your own mountain, I want you to know this: it's okay to rest. It's okay to ask for help. And it's okay to let go of the idea that success has to hurt. Because the truth is, the most meaningful achievements don't come from crushing your goals. They come from loving the journey. And that's a lesson worth holding on to. As I settled into this new mindset, I realized that what I had once believed to be the right way to succeed was a narrow, toxic path. In reality, success was more fluid than I had imagined. It wasn't about being the best, fastest, or most efficient. It was about balance. It was about acknowledging that progress doesn't always look like a straight line and that setbacks aren't failures, but rather moments of learning. One of the most freeing lessons I learned was how to let go of comparison. In a world where everyone is showing their highlight reels, it's easy to fall into the trap of believing everyone else has it figured out. I used to measure myself against people who had different dreams, different circumstances, and different timelines. But once I embraced my own path, one with bumps and detours, I stopped seeing others' success as a threat and started to appreciate it as inspiration. During my time in school, I met other students who had faced their own struggles, some of them even more difficult than my own. We became a community that celebrated each other's growth, not just the big wins. And that sense of belonging was more fulfilling than any trophy or title I had once dreamed of. I wasn't climbing a mountain anymore. I was walking beside others, sharing the journey. This wasn't just a shift in my career or my goals. It was a transformation in how I approached life itself. It was about choosing sustainability over intensity, patience over perfection, and connection over competition. The moral: redefining success. What I came to realize, and what I hope you take away from my story, is that success isn't a mountain you need to conquer. It's a series of moments, decisions, and connections that build on each other. The true measure of success isn't in how many goals you crush, but in how much you enjoy the process of reaching them. Success doesn't have to come at the cost of your well-being, your relationships, or your peace of mind. By letting go of the idea that success must always be a grind, I've learned that it's more meaningful to pursue goals that resonate with you on a deeper level. I'm not saying there won't be hard work or setbacks. Life will always have its challenges. But when you align your efforts with your true passions, the journey becomes something worth embracing, something that gives you energy rather than drains it. So, my advice to anyone reading this who feels overwhelmed by their climb: take a step back, breathe, rest, reevaluate your definition of success. Understand that your value is not tied to your productivity or your ability to achieve. Your value is inherent, and real success comes when you find balance and joy in your journey. Let go of the toxic pressure to crush it and replace it with the freedom to grow, learn, and enjoy the ride. Because in the end, that's where the real magic happens. The unseen battles. Leaving my corporate job was the easiest decision I'd ever made. But stepping away from a mountain I'd spent so many years climbing turned out to be the hardest part of the whole journey. At first, the space felt like freedom, a breath of air after being submerged underwater for too long. I filled my days with rest, reflection, and reading, trying to reconnect with what I had lost during my frantic pursuit of success. But it wasn't long before the feelings of guilt and doubt crept back in. I found myself thinking, what if I never climb again? The thought would paralyze me. Was I giving up? Was I allowing myself to slip into mediocrity? The whispers of the old hustle culture echoed in my mind, reminding me that success was something that required constant motion, constant progress. The idea of resting felt almost sinful. It took months for me to realize that these thoughts weren't just remnants of the workaholic I used to be. They were reflections of the deep societal conditioning I had internalized. The world had made me believe that worth and value were earned, measured in deadlines met, emails answered, and goals accomplished. That belief had been so deeply ingrained in me that even when I walked away from the grind, I continued to carry its weight with me. But over time, I began to confront these thoughts head on, instead of pushing them aside or hiding from them. I started asking myself, why did I feel so much pressure to keep moving, to keep producing, to keep achieving? What would happen if I just allowed myself to be without the constant need for validation? This self inquiry opened a door to a new phase in my journey. I began to see that real growth didn't necessarily mean constantly pushing forward. It meant understanding myself better, accepting my flaws, and embracing the process of healing. It wasn't glamorous, it wasn't sexy, but it was real. Learning to reconnect. As I distanced myself from my old job, I also had to face another painful truth. I had lost touch with the people who mattered most to me. I had sacrificed friendships, relationships, and my own mental health in the name of climbing the success ladder. But now, with the weight of that ladder lifted off my shoulders, I saw clearly how much I had neglected the ones who had always been there for me. The first step was reconnecting with my family. I'd avoided them for so long, unable to answer their concerned questions about my well being without feeling ashamed. I was embarrassed that I hadn't lived up to their expectations, that I wasn't the person they thought I would become. I feared that they might see me as a failure. But when I finally gathered the courage to sit down with them and admit how much I had been struggling, their response was not disappointment, it was love. They told me they were proud of me, not for the career I had, but for the person I was becoming. They expressed relief that I had found the courage to take a step back and prioritize my health. That conversation marked a turning point in my healing. I started to realize that love and connection were far more important than any title or paycheck. Success, in its truest form, was never about the material. It was about the richness of the relationships you nurture and the authenticity with which you live. I also reached out to old friends who I had pushed away in pursuit of my career. It wasn't easy. Some were understanding, while others were hurt. And rightfully so. I had to apologize for the distance I'd created between us, for choosing work over them. But as I rebuilt those connections, I realized that friendship was one of the most powerful forms of success. True success wasn't about having the biggest office or the most impressive LinkedIn profile. It was about surrounding yourself with people who supported you through thick and thin, who loved you not for your achievements, but for your heart, the joy of learning again. After years of focusing solely on career advancement and external validation, I found joy in learning for the sake of learning. I enrolled in courses that interested me, subjects like philosophy, mindfulness, and art, without any pressure to turn them into something useful or profitable. I was rediscovering the simple pleasure of curiosity. Through this process, I also began to understand the importance of failure. In my old mindset, failure had been something to avoid at all costs. It was a sign that you hadn't worked hard enough, hadn't sacrificed enough. But in my new perspective, failure became a tool for growth. I wasn't afraid to try new things and fall short, because I understood that it was a natural part of the process. Failure wasn't the end of the road. It was just a detour, a signpost pointing me in a new direction. One of the most profound lessons I learned during this time came from a painting class I took. I had no artistic talent, no experience with a paintbrush, and honestly, I expected to fail miserably. But when I sat down in front of the canvas, something shifted inside me. There was no pressure to be perfect, no expectation to create a masterpiece. I was simply there to paint, to express myself in the most raw, unfiltered way. At first, my paintings were terrible. The brushstrokes were clumsy, the colors didn't blend, and the shapes were off. But with each brushstroke, I felt a deep sense of freedom. I wasn't doing this to impress anyone, and there were no deadlines to meet. I was simply creating for the sake of creating, and that experience was liberating. Slowly, I began to see parallels between painting and life itself. There would be moments of chaos and imperfection, but that was where the beauty existed. Life wasn't about creating a perfectly polished image. It was about being willing to make mistakes, embrace them, and learn as you go. In that class, I didn't just learn how to paint, I learned how to live more fully, with all the messiness and unpredictability that it entailed. A new way forward. As I continued my journey of self discovery, I realized that the old notion of success I had clung to for so long was simply a mirage. I had spent my entire life chasing something that didn't even exist. There was no end to success, no singular moment where you could finally say, I've made it. Instead, success was about creating a life that was meaningful, one filled with purpose, connection, and authenticity. This realization changed everything. I stopped measuring my worth by external achievements and began to measure it by the quality of my life. Was I living in alignment with my values? Was I present with the people I cared about? Was I growing emotionally, spiritually, and intellectually? If the answer was yes, then I was successful. I still had goals, dreams of becoming a psychologist, of helping others navigate the challenges I had faced, but they no longer felt like mountains to climb. They were simply part of the journey, not the destination. And for the first time in my life, I was okay with that. The final lesson: letting go of perfection. As I reflect on everything I've learned over the years, I've come to understand that there is no one right way to live, to succeed, or to be. The key is to let go of the need for perfection. It's okay to not have everything figured out. It's okay to rest, to fall, and to rise again. Perfection isn't the goal, it's the willingness to embrace the process. However messy and imperfect it may be, real success is not about crushing your goals. It's about finding joy in the pursuit and realizing that the path you walk, with all its twists and turns, is just as important as the destination. Moral of the story: the most important lesson I learned through this journey is that success is not a destination to be reached by constantly pushing, sacrificing, and chasing after an idealized version of what we're supposed to be. Success, true success, is a continuous process of growth, self awareness, and balance. It isn't about how hard you grind or how much you sacrifice. It's about finding joy in the journey, embracing imperfections, and aligning your actions with what truly matters to you. It's about understanding that taking care of yourself, fostering meaningful relationships, and allowing space for rest. Creativity and exploration are as important as any career achievement or personal milestone. No amount of external validation can fill the void if you're not being authentic to who you are. When we start viewing success as a balance between striving and letting go, ambition and acceptance, we give ourselves permission to enjoy life as it unfolds. We learn that we don't need to crush it at all costs. Instead, we can live with purpose and joy, knowing that the process, the learning, and the connections we make along the way are what truly define our success. Part 4. Rewriting the narrative. Stepping into a new chapter. A year had passed since I left the corporate world. And in that time, I made more progress on my internal journey than I had in all the years spent climbing the mountain of success. My sense of self-worth was no longer tied to external validation. And I had learned to trust my own rhythm, one that was more in tune with my values, passions, and well-being. But just as I had learned to let go of the hustle culture that once defined me, I also realized something else, that I could still pursue meaningful goals without the pressure to constantly prove myself. This realization wasn't an invitation to give up on ambition. It was an invitation to redefine it. During this period of introspection, I started to recognize a deep, underlying calling to help others navigate the same toxic cycle I had been caught in. I had spent so much time feeling like I was alone in my struggles, believing that I was the only one who couldn't handle the pressure. But as I shared my story with friends, family, and even strangers, I realized that many people were facing similar challenges. We had all been conditioned to equate success with suffering, to believe that we had to burn ourselves out to be valuable. I knew then that my next step would involve not just helping myself, but also giving back to others in a way that could inspire them to break free from the same unhealthy mindset. This was where my journey took a new turn toward becoming a psychologist. The decision to pursue psychology. Going back to school was daunting. The idea of starting over, of returning to the classroom after years away, felt terrifying at times. But there was something deep within me that called me to take this step. It wasn't just a career shift, it was a personal mission to understand human behavior, the mechanisms that drive us, and the ways we can break free from societal expectations that suffocate us. When I first began my studies in psychology, I felt both exhilarated and out of place. The academic world felt like a completely different universe, one filled with jargon and theories that I had to wrap my head around. But as I settled in, I realized that the most powerful learning experiences were the ones that challenged me to look at myself, to question my own beliefs, and to dive deeper into understanding why we, as humans, behave the way we do. In many ways, My studies mirrored my personal journey. I learned about cognitive biases, emotional regulation, the effects of stress on mental health, and the ways societal structures influence our self-worth. Each lesson felt like a piece of the puzzle falling into place, allowing me to understand not just myself, but the world around me more clearly. The more I learned, the more I understood that the path to well-being isn't linear. It isn't about always striving for the next goal or wearing exhaustion as a badge of honor. It's about addressing the internal wounds, the negative thought patterns, and the unhealthy beliefs that hold us back. It's about helping others and ourselves cultivate a mindset that prioritizes self-care, emotional resilience, and healthy ambition. Giving back, helping others break free. After completing my degree, I began working as a therapist. At first, I thought I'd be the one helping others achieve success. But I quickly learned that true therapy was not about telling people how to climb their own mountains. It was about guiding them through their own process of healing and self-discovery. Each session, each conversation became an opportunity to challenge the societal standards that define success in such limiting ways. I worked with clients who had been told their worth was dependent on how hard they worked, how much they achieved, or how perfectly they fit into a specific mold. They came to me feeling exhausted, burned out, and questioning their purpose in life. And that's when I realized how far I had come from the 23-year-old who felt terrified of not living up to her potential, to the therapist who now understood that real success wasn't about constant achievement. It was about finding alignment with one's true values, cultivating peace, and learning to trust the process of life. I didn't want to teach my clients to avoid hard work or to shy away from their dreams. I wanted to show them how to chase their dreams in a way that didn't compromise their mental health or happiness. I wanted to help them find the space to breathe, to fail, and to grow in ways that weren't tied to external validation. I also began to create workshops and write about my journey, hoping that my story could inspire others to shift their perspective on success. What I had learned through my own struggles was that we all had the power to break free from toxic patterns, to find our own rhythm, and to build a life that aligned with our authentic selves. Embracing the now, as I continue this work, I'm reminded daily of how far I've come and how far we all can go when we stop measuring ourselves by standards that don't serve us. The key is to keep evolving, accepting that life is a series of chapters, each with its own lessons, challenges, and growth. There's no end point, no singular moment where you can declare yourself a success. Success, in the truest sense, is an ongoing process, a journey. As I look to the future, I see not a mountain to climb, but a river to navigate. There will be times when the waters are calm, and there will be times when the current pulls fiercely. But I've learned that the most important thing isn't to fight the current, It's to ride with it, to adapt, and to stay true to the values that guide me. The journey of life, just like the journey of success, isn't meant to be rushed. It's meant to be lived with all its ups and downs, twists and turns. It's meant to be savored, not conquered. And the sooner we embrace that truth, the sooner we can find peace, purpose, and the kind of success that truly fulfills us. I'm so glad you spent this time with me. If you like the story, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more. Take care and see you next time.